lying in bed hugging my wife close. Reflected on my day. It began with a job I appreciate and finished with my lovely family. I enjoyed playing with my kids, sharing a meal, and watching baseball together later. Once the kids were asleep, my wife and I had a romantic interlude in our bedroom. We hugged and kissed satisfied. As my wife fell asleep, I wrapped my arm around her and felt happy. Sure, my life may appear mundane to others, but it is wonderful for me. Fortunately, I was unaware that it would be the last typical day like that. The phone rang shortly before noon. Car's voice trembled with emotions and stress, making it difficult to understand what she said. It appeared to be about our son Ethan, his kidneys. In hospital. I promised to meet her there in 20 minutes. I rushed out and briefed my supervisor on the issue. I arrived at the hospital in less than 20 minutes. Miraculously without any traffic tickets. Dr. Michael Fierce informed me in the emergency room where Ethan was rushed in. Doubled over in pain. The quick transition from a healthy freshman to stage 3 chronic kidney disease perplexed the doctor, who was awaiting a specialist's evaluation. Lisa and I tried to make appearances for Ethan. It weighed hard on us. As Lisa looked up the ailment on her phone, I kept close to Ethan and tried to keep the atmosphere light. Car's pale complexion and sorrowful expressions on the other hand hinted at a bleak future for our son. Brendan Nicholas, a specialist doctor, verified our fears 45 minutes later. He emphasized that Ethan required a kidney transplant right away in order to graduate from high school. Even with dialysis, he was just 14. Ethan received the news fairly well, albeit he couldn't stop crying. I could not blame him. Lisa joined him in tears moments later. Dr. Nicholas said that while kidney transplants are prevalent these days, finding a suitable match is not certain. Ideally, a family member would be the greatest fit, but our alternatives were restricted. I was the lone child, and Car's sibling had young children who were unable to contribute. Even Ethan's 17-year-old sister was disqualified. Despite testing 7 family members, including the grandparents, none were viable donors. It was a devastating blow for our family. Regardless of our despair, the doctors were optimistic, albeit cautious still. Ethan's situation appeared bleak. After receiving the bad news, we cried at the hospital and at home for a week. To quote Monty Python's Flying Circus, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Similarly, nobody expects a miracle. However, this appeared to be the case about a week later, and it came from an unexpected location. Halfway around the world, Lisa and I contacted Mateo Santiago, an 18-year-old whose parents were close friends with us. Almost like family, although we were not related. Mateo turned out to be a match for Ethan in a 3-way transplant. Dr. Nicholas highlighted the importance of finding a family match. Clearly thrilled with the news because a half-sibling is nearly as good as a complete sibling. But Doc, he isn't a half. Oh no, I exclaimed, grasping the ramifications as Dr. Nicholas watched in horror. My mind strained to comprehend the revelation. Initially I viewed it as a miracle for Ethan. Then it occurred to me that it could be the end of my marriage. I looked at Lisa, who seemed to shrink before my eyes. Lisa, sweetheart, I muttered, feeling overwhelmed. She turned away, her face flushing profusely. I stood silently, waiting for a reaction. Seconds passed, then minutes. I cleared my throat. Right now, my attention is on Ethan. She eventually spoke, her tone forceful. I had to make the call. This was for Ethan. Thank you for considering someone else this time, I said bluntly, with our emphasis focused on Ethan. We longed for a miracle, even while our marriage appeared to be crumbling. After a few minutes of stillness, Lisa fixed my gaze, her eyes hardening. Not now, Alex. I can't deal with it right now. I understood her message and acknowledged it, but it did not provide much consolation. When do they arrive? I inquired. They are due here next Thursday. She responded quietly. Great. They can stay with us as usual, I reassured. The Santiagos had stayed with us 6 times in total over the years. We had built up our basement as a guest suite, complete with a master bedroom, a smaller room, and a full bathroom. It wasn't as glamorous as the 5-star hotels they typically stayed at, but they were family well. That is questionable. Lisa and Robbie were roommates at Iowa State University for their final 2 years when I started dating Lisa right before Christmas of our junior year. Robbie and Felix were already together. It took me some time to warm up to Felix. He came from a wealthy Spanish family and possessed the air of a spoiled playboy. However, I ultimately discovered he was actually compassionate, albeit inexperienced outside of his privileged bubble. Before traveling to the United States for college, we gradually formed a strong bond, although much of it revolved around our significant others. Lisa and Robbie were not just roommates but also best friends, fueling campus rumors that their relationship was more than platonic. However, I never saw any proof to corroborate those rumors. Felix and Robbie married 6 months after we graduated. Lisa was the maid of honor, and I attended as a visitor in turn. Robbie served as car's matron of honor for our wedding in Champaign, Illinois. 6 months later, with Felix present, our lives became quite chaotic alongside Ethan, necessitating a daily dialysis. There appeared to be an ongoing presence of medical experts. There were various factors to consider, including the upcoming operation and post-operative care, as well as drugs and psychological elements. I couldn't imagine burdening a 14-year-old with such a huge load. Ethan was naturally scared, and I empathized with him. He was normally a strong, funny child, but this situation made him feel defenseless and in misery. It hurts me tremendously to watch him struggle. I knew there was little I could do to relieve his agony. I recognized that Lisa was as concerned about our son's condition as I was, so I avoided discussing her affair, allowing it to fester silently. The following week, I worked half-days, which provided a welcome respite from Ethan's illness and my wife's infidelity. Despite my best efforts to ignore it, Ethan's illness weighed heavy on my heart, and Car's betrayal felt like a gut hit. Work became my escape from the suffering. Lisa and I had few moments alone over the next few days, as we spent time at home with our daughter Angela, or AJ for short. She was constantly present, obstructing any private conversations. Our time alone in the bedroom was solely for sleeping because weariness frequently provided relief. In ordinary conditions, the presence of the Santiago would have created a joyous atmosphere. While the typical hugs were shared, I remained distant, grappling with a range of feelings, including rage and nausea. It took several minutes for Robbie to see me. Her manner changed as she approached and tightly held me, murmuring an apology in my ear before pulling back. As I looked around, I realized everyone's attention was focused on me. Neither Ethan nor AJ were notified about their biological relationship with Mateo. They saw Mateo's compatibility with Ethan as a miraculous coincidence, which we, the 4 grown-ups, preferred to keep to ourselves for the time being. Mateo had been aware of the relationship for around 4 years. As I later uncovered, Kerry stated that he agreed with his parents' interpretation of the situation. Everyone who knew seemed to accept it. Perhaps one day after I've accepted it, I'll be okay with it as well, I thought. Despite my reservations, Lisa and the Santiagos went to the hospital to see Ethan once everyone had settled down. AJ and I remained behind after Car's SUV had driven away. AJ approached me. "What is happening, Dad?" she inquired. "I'm not clueless. There's certainly something going on between you and Mom. It appears to also involve Aunt Robbie and Uncle Felix. If you don't tell me, I will simply ask Mateo. I'm sure he knows and he'll spill everything. He tells me everything. There are advantages and disadvantages to raising extremely clever children. One disadvantage is that it is difficult to hide things from them. AJ was extraordinarily bright. I thought it was best to be honest with her. Even if I didn't know all of the facts this way, she would receive the truth without bias. Your mother cheated on me with Jorge Santiago, giving birth to Mateo, who turned out to be a half-sibling to both her and Ethan. That's why Mateo was an ideal candidate for Ethan's transplant. I told her wow. She said gently, wait. You didn't know about it until Ethan became sick. Right. That is why you have been giving Mom those glances for the past week or so. I nodded in agreement, my cheeks flushing with humiliation. Little did I realize there was more to come. I thought so. You weren't aware that Mom stayed in the bedroom with Aunt Robbie and Uncle Felix when we visited them in Spain all those years. They didn't stop until I was approximately 12. AJ revealed. Mom often emphasized that she and Aunt Robbie were like sisters. You were aware of it, she said. My jaw dropped in utter surprise. I was left dumbfounded. It seemed unnecessary for me to react to her inquiry. I managed to utter, what is your plan? AJ whispered again, for now nothing. We need to complete Ethan's surgery first. I am confident that we will address it thoroughly. I informed her that we would prefer if she did not tell anyone until after we had spoken. Sure, Dad, I have your back on this, Dad, she agreed. Thank you, honey. I will admit that I felt nervous with my wife at the Santiagos. I noticed they were throwing me a lot of looks and appeared to be having hushed conversations. Back at the house on Friday night, Mateo approached me silently. Can we speak? Is it just you and me, Uncle Alex? It's important. He requested. How could I refuse, Mateo? You're the one who saved my son and your half-brother. I acknowledged, gently noting his raised eyebrows. Mateo and I walked around our neighborhood. Listen. Uncle Alex. I understand how dreadful and embarrassing this situation is. I'm pleased I can help, Ethan, he said. But I need to ask you for a favor, just between us. I believe I've earned the right to ask. I do not want you to divorce Aunt Kay because of this. And I need you to avoid violently retaliating against my father. Mateo pleaded. I could see the turmoil in his eyes. I studied his lovely features carefully. He bore a great resemblance to Henry. But now that I knew what to look for, I could see some of my wife in him in retrospect. He did resemble Ethan quite a bit, I thought. How come I had never seen that before? I can't commit to stay with my wife when Ethan leaves for college. But I can promise not to seek physical revenge on your father. Mateo, that is the most I can offer, I said. Even with everything you're doing for me and yourself. How are you managing with all of this, Mateo? How do you feel about Aunt Lisa and being Ethan's half-brother? I inquired, he said. I was pretty shaken when I first found out. But I would not exist if Dad and Aunt Lisa had not decided to have a kid together. Mom is my mother in every sense. And Aunt Lisa is still Aunt Lisa, however. I suppose I have even greater affection for her in my heart. And I've always thought of Ethan as a younger brother. I believe it's awesome that he's my brother. And I'm delighted I can help him. We strolled back home in quiet. Mateo's remarks hung heavily on my mind. He had cast light on new facets of the problem, forcing me to face the brutal reality of it all. The transplant was performed the following Tuesday, with 5 of us nervously waiting. Both boys recovered well from surgery, and Ethan's replacement kidney began to function immediately, which the doctors assured us was a good indication. We were exhausted and left the hospital that night. I didn't think much about it when Robbie offered to join me to get our Chinese takeout a few days after surgery. However, during the ride she began apologizing. And I discovered the whole truth. By the time we got home I had lost my appetite. I've served in the Naval Reserve for 2 decades, including 3 foreign deployments. The first occurred shortly after Lisa and I were married. She stayed with Robbie and Felix throughout my deployment to the Middle East. It should not have occurred, but it did, I thought. I'm sorry, Alex, she said. We were partying one night, and things went out of hand. So we ended up in bed together. That's when I had the worst idea ever. I never told anyone but Lisa. But I can't conceive children. And I desperately wanted kids. So I assumed she would become pregnant by Felix. I have the baby and could adopt it. We would raise the child and you would never know. The plan appeared foolproof. Lisa gave birth to a gorgeous baby boy. And by the time I returned 6 months later, She had lost most of her baby weight. We just passed off any changes in her appearance as the result of our sumptuous dinners. And I had no idea until Ethan became unwell. Robbie lowered her head, blushing slightly. I waited for her to continue, sensing that there was more to the narrative. I said after a minute. I spoke up, detailing my talk with AJ and delegating the rest to Robbie. She replied with a murmur, "Oh, I know they didn't just hook up once. I may not have known everything, but I'm not ignorant." Robbie confessed no. It wasn't a one-time deal. They were involved long before she became pregnant, and their relationship has remained since. It developed into something more than friendship right beneath your nose. They became romantically involved. I didn't expect that, but at that point, I needed to make a decision. I had my child, and I loved Felix and Lisa. So I decided to stay and be a part of their lives rather than drive them away. She continued, recalling how they would spend time together during my deployments and vacations, eventually taking separate trips as AJ grew older and began to notice something was wrong. "Don't get furious, Alex, everybody profited from it." Robbie insisted. "I gained a son. Felix and Lisa spent their time together. And your son received a new kidney. I suppose revealing yourself was the last thing you wanted." I said cynically. "I appreciate it finally. A selfless gesture by the most selfish woman." Robbie was sobbing and Felix appeared guilty, while Lisa's expression alternated between guilt, fear and wrath. "Now, Alex, where should we proceed from here?" she inquired. "I don't want to divorce Lisa," I explained, "because of my vow to your son. And because I never violate pledges or vows. You have 4 years till I file for divorce. It will happen once Ethan departs for college. But we will not talk about it in front of him," I declared firmly. "You'll have to be the one to tell him Mateo is his half-brother. And it needs to happen quickly," I said. "I will be there to make sure you tell him the truth about a woman who cheated on her spouse, not a romantic story. But I believe he'll be glad to have Mateo as a brother, considering how close they are already." AJ was thrilled after she got past her anger at your terrible treatment of me. Lisa's voice was tight as she questioned if she knew everything now. "She's fascinated," I chuckled bitterly. "I didn't spill the beans. AJ is clever. And she has pieced things together throughout the years. She didn't have all of the information. But she had a feeling, however. Because she was unsure and you lied to her. She never told me the truth. She only told me what she knew when I asked. She felt horrible for not informing me sooner. Our son, however, is clueless. The happiness of youth and his faith in us. Mateo has known for years that you two are making a joke of me. I've seen that look of pity in his eyes several times. It's fantastic when a youngster feels sorry for you because he knows his father and your wife are deceiving their marriage. Everyone gained from this but me. I received the short end of the stick," I continued. "That is not true, Alex," Lisa sobbed. "I love you. I have been a good wife and mother. If Ethan hadn't become ill, you'd still be happy and clueless. Can we just get back to being happy? I never said no to proximity. So you believe I should be satisfied as your second choice? Just because I wasn't sure what was going on. I should have always been your first choice. And there should have been no other alternatives. But tell me, was I ever your first choice?" I questioned. She hesitated again, struggling with her words at first. "We first got married before I moved in with Robbie and Felix," she revealed. "So you're saying there was a period when we were intimate? And you weren't thinking about Felix? Or were you doing it out of sympathy for me? How could you have children with me if you loved someone else?" I pressed. "I thought you deserved to have children of your own." "I love you, remember," she defended. "Right. How could I forget that?" I replied. "But based on your acts, I'm guessing you love our children as much as you do your child with him." She stared at me before looking at Robbie and Felix. They stayed silent. This should be a private talk without Robbie and Felix. Lisa expressed scornfully, "Are you kidding me? This mess was produced by Robbie and Felix," I shouted. All three of them appeared stunned by my outburst. They appeared on edge. "All right. I made a promise to Matea and I intend to keep it. But I do need something from you, Lisa. I need you to commit to be faithful to me until Ethan goes away to college. This means no more vacations to Spain without me and no more visits with the Santiagos while I'm on reserve duty. Faithful means faithful. Break that commitment. And I'll break mine with Matea and file for divorce right now. I stated I get it. Robbie grinned as Lisa and Felix sat surprised and speechless. Robbie appeared to understand. Perhaps she simply realized how the promise could help her as well. Lisa and Felix exchanged long, intense stares before Lisa quietly agreed. Nodding slightly, I recalled, good. Does anyone want more wine? I offered. Following Santiago's return to Spain, I relocated to the master bedroom suite in the basement guest room. Lisa and I had shared our bed while they were here, but we hadn't been intimate since Ethan became ill. That suited me just fine. After I learned about my wife and Felix. Don't be childish, Alex. We've gotten close several times over the years when I was sleeping with Felix. And you didn't know? Lisa snapped. That's the issue. Lisa, I did not know. Now that I know you've had another man. It's not the same for me. Lisa appeared sour. Like if she had been sucking on a lemon. You men with such delicate egos, she said. I'll be upstairs when you get over it. I got the impression she had no idea how this was going to play out. Modern medicine is fantastic, I thought to myself. Ethan was back to his old self 6 months after surgery. Joking and acting like any other high schooler. While he'd require medication to prevent transplant rejection and couldn't play tackle football. He'd regained control of his life and virtually everything else. It felt like the ideal time for him to hear the truth about his relationship with Matea. Lisa and I debated this for several days. She leaned towards letting things happen naturally, hoping Ethan would figure it out for himself. I could not agree with that approach. You owe him the complete story, as we discussed months ago. And let's hold a family meeting so AJ can hear everything too. I persisted with a big sigh. Lisa grudgingly nodded. Ethan had recently turned 15 and as a parent, I knew teenage minds might be difficult to read. I grinned, recalling my own bewilderment at that age and my father's mysterious methods. This conversation might not be easy. And I hoped Lisa understood. Watching for my lethargic boy. It appeared like Ethan took the news of being Mateo's half-brother very well. Which I expected, given that he already adored Mateo like a brother. However, the how element was more difficult to market weight. You had a close relationship with Uncle Felix. You mean you left him, as the children would say. But you were married to Dad at the time, right? Ethan shouted. Lisa began yelling back at our son. But I stopped her by gripping her arm. She became silent, looking guilty. And the room became quiet. I believe left him is the correct term, I admitted. But that is my problem to handle. I only found out about it after you became sick. Your mother contacted the Santiagos, thinking Mateo would be a match for your kidney transplant. She went to tremendous lengths to support you. So the least you can do is enjoy it. Ethan lowered his head, visibly pained and puzzled. I empathized with him. If anyone should be upset, it would be me. Trust me, I am. But your mother and I will figure this out together. I am not leaving you. That is why I relocated to the basement. I reassured him. AJ appeared eager to speak up. But I abruptly gestured for her to be silent. She settled back into the sofa. Lisa, seated next to her, appeared to be about to collapse under the weight of guilt. Several months later, AJ left for Central Michigan University. Ethan humorously asked if he may accompany her, but his serious demeanor suggested otherwise. Lisa and I remained civil around our son, attending his school functions together. Despite our attempts to appear loving, I could see the tension on my wife's face. But I was determined to enjoy my life and my duty as a father. Living separately under the same roof took its toll on my wife. We lacked physical love, loving words, and light banter, and there was no intimacy. She couldn't start anything in bed because I wasn't there for her. This scenario was not simple for me either. Her betrayal reduced my desire. Every time I became aroused, Car's thoughts with Felix during the last 2 decades had supplanted any excitement. Needless to say, I got fairly proficient at solo activities. Alex, can't we get back to the way we used to be physically? Lisa pleaded one evening. Perhaps 3 months later, when Ethan was out with friends. I studied her. She remained pretty with a decent physique. This would be just physical because I no longer loved her. But I did care. Those emotions were dissipating. It would be entirely physical and not romantic. I'd seek my joy while she may seek hers. I guess I had no intention of exerting myself for her delight. But you'll have to come into my room. Knowing what I know now, you have betrayed our marital bed numerous times. And I will not be intimate with you there again. I responded hoarsely. Okay, I understand. I will join you in a few minutes. I just need to freshen up, she added. Lisa freshened up by putting on lipstick, spritzing perfume, combing her hair, and wearing my favorite lace teddy underneath her bathrobe. When she entered my room, she displayed the bear twirling around for my approval. To maintain my composure, I had to rapidly dismiss thoughts of her and Felix. After we finished, I rolled away from Lisa, lying on my back reminiscing about the past. We'd enjoyed this closeness, but those days were now only memories. I bemoaned their loss while Lisa sniffled beside me. Despite my desire to console her, I knew she could sense my thoughts. I resisted, and she dressed quietly and returned upstairs without saying anything. There was no chat or warm talk, just silence. Upstairs, as I sat in the family room to watch television in athletic shorts and a t-shirt, I heard the shower running in our bathroom. I was seated when Ethan came home. Something was obviously bothering him. Dad, it's been months since you took Mom somewhere. Will you ever forgive her and be together again? He asked. It was time for honesty, and I paused before responding. Ethan, I'm not sure I can forgive her enough to go back to how things were. It was all a fad. Your mother adored Uncle Felix, not me, knowing that I am only her second choice. How can I return to that? I emphasize that whereas football teams have backup quarterbacks, marriages do not have backup husbands. I apologize, son, but what we have now may be the best we can hope for. Ethan seemed upset, but I thought he understood the issue. He went into his room and Lisa caught on. Every few weeks, she would request a one-time intimacy in exchange for proximity. I assumed she took care of herself the rest of the time, just like I did. She could have been slipping out for all I knew, but she was aware of the implications if detected. I'm not sure, Lisa, if you felt the same way I did about Ethan's graduation. I may have cared, but I stopped worrying about her emotions. I didn't love her anymore. I cared, of course, given our shared past and children, but her dishonesty had dulled my emotions. I used to think that hate was the antithesis of love, but now I see it as indifference. I recall going to college with only clothes, underwear and a stereo. Ethan took more, using devices and crates. Times have changed. Ethan was ecstatic and talked incessantly throughout the drive. Lisa scarcely said a word and I remained silent. Ethan didn't realize he was dominating the talk. The ride home without Ethan was oddly quiet. I drove the majority of the way. Lisa handled navigation and music. If I never hear another Michael Bolton song again, it will be far too soon, I thought. I could tell Lisa was down now that both kids were basically gone. Lisa was a fantastic mother, and I knew she cared more about her children than about me. I may not have been her favorite person, but AJ and Ethan were undoubtedly her favorites. Her dismal demeanor prevented her from seeing the big picture. I figured I'd feel better once Lisa was served. Once we got home, but when she received the envelope, she looked saddened, fell into tears and fled inside. It made me feel smaller. Setting up vengeance plans after the trip seemed fulfilling at the time, but in retrospect it was simply petty. I realized I needed assistance. I knew our marriage was over the moment I learned about her affair. I kept my commitment to Martea and stayed with Carrie until Ethan left for college. I granted her an extra 2 days. I was inside my room when I heard her knock. "Do you hate me now, Alex?" she asked quietly. "Have I wrecked things?" "Yes, Lisa. You ruined everything, but I do not detest you. I said I just don't care about you anymore. But we had something nice for years before you found out." She explained. "Did we? For me. Everything was a lie when you first went to stay with Robbie and Felix. You didn't love only me as you had promised. You did not give yourself to me alone. As you promised, you have a child with another man. Why couldn't you simply be honest with me? You once fell for Felix, why not divorce me? You stayed, she gave me 2 wonderful children. But for 18 years you fooled me. You stole away 18 years that I could have spent choosing someone to share my life with. Not being the second choice of a selfish woman. Get back to Felix, Carrie. Can't you see that I'm setting you free? But I loved you, Alex. Don't you realize that I couldn't have stayed with you for 20 years if I didn't love you? I might not be as in love with you as I am with Felix. But I really do adore you," she cried. "Your idea of love is vastly different from mine. Lisa, if you truly loved me, you would have treated me properly and not kept me as a backup. I deserve to be number 1. I deserve to be the one you adored and sought. By tricking me, you never gave me the option to be your number 2. Alternatively, locate someone who wanted me as number 1. I gave you 2 wonderful children. We lived a good life, or so I thought. It is all gone now. You got exactly what you wanted. Felix got what he desired. Robbie got what she desired, so what did I get? Nothing. So what were your plans after the kids left? Assuming I never learned about you and Felix." She paused before responding. "I guess I always assumed I'd return to Spain with Felix and Robert. I apologize, Alex. I guess I never thought about you or my long-term goals." She added quietly. "I know," I said gently. She muttered, "I won't fight the divorce." I was startled that neither of my kids supported my choice to divorce their mother. They were initially disturbed by her adultery. But she persuaded them that her feelings for me were genuine. Her passion for Felix had been going on for so long that they could rationalize it to themselves. They also justified that I would be okay as her second choice. "Which Robbie accepts. Why can't you be like her, AJ?" questioned Aunt Robbie. "Along with Uncle Felix and your mother. Helped plan everything. I was left out. Everyone except me was involved in this catastrophe. Why are you excluding me?" "Because your mother knew I would not agree," I stated. "That asking forgiveness is easier than asking for permission. AJ, would you allow your husband to have another lover he cared more about than you?" "No way. I will annihilate him if he even suggests it," she stated strongly. "But this has been going on for more than 20 years. So I should be able to tolerate it. As Aunt Robbie does. As if it were your own experience." She winced and glanced aside, indicating the end of the conversation. My children validated my hunch that Lisa would travel to Spain following the divorce. I missed my buddies, but not the life I had or didn't have. When I realized I had lost faith in women, I sought counseling. I wasn't actively looking for a new relationship. I went on a couple of dates and experienced some intimacy. But it was no longer a priority. I was startled to find so many single women aged 40 to 50. I hadn't realized I was reportedly blissfully married. I had no idea how much the dating world had evolved over the last 2 decades. Previously, men took the lead. But now the situation is more balanced. It took me some time to adjust to this transition. I must admit that when a woman makes the first approach, it boosts my ego significantly. Robbie showed up at my door around 2 years after my divorce, which surprised me. It took me a time to recognize her. Even though she looked very similar to earlier, she was still really lovely. "Hello, Robbie. What brought you here?" I inquired, still a little stunned. "I just wanted to check in with an old friend and see whether we were still pals," she responded sweetly after offering her coffee. We sat down in the family room. She appeared embarrassed, clearing her throat. "So, Alex, are we still friends? She asked. I hesitated. Thinking about it, we used to be, or so I thought. Then I discovered otherwise, I began. But she interrupted. No, that is not correct. She insisted. I've always considered you a buddy. If this is the case, how could you have done what you did to me? I pressed. I was selfish and foolish, Robbie admits. I didn't consider the consequences because I trusted Felix and Lisa. Lisa was like a sister to me. I never saw it coming. I put up with that because I got Mateo out of the situation. And after that, it was only for a few days here and there over the years. And I loved it when you prevented her from visiting him for a few years. But then you divorced her and brought her back into both his and my lives. I suppose after all these years, I'm bored of being his second best lady, she said. I absolutely see where you're coming from now, God. I was so stupid. Hurts, doesn't it? I asked smugly. She did not respond but did lower her eyes finally. Someone exhibiting some sorrow. I suppose we can be buddies again of a sort. Friends are bonded by their common experience. I said. We talked late into the night. We switched from coffee to a bottle of Pinot Grigio and completed it when she was ready to depart. I astonished both her and myself when I offered her my guest room. And she accepted. It was enjoyable. I had to confess that I had regained a portion of my previous life. I believe we both loved the familiarity. The second weekend she stayed with me. We had dinner at a restaurant, then went to an upscale bar for drinks and dessert. It was just two old friends, not a date. But somewhere along the road hormones took over. She was dressed in a fairly tight dark blue dress with more than a touch of cleavage and plenty of muscular, tight legs. I hadn't planned on anything occurring. So I was astonished when I felt myself becoming hard while we were having dessert. I leaned in and she simply knew. She leaned across the table to take my hand. We kept holding hands for the remainder of the night. We were about a block away from my place when Robbie changed the game. This doesn't have to mean anything, Alex. She muttered. You're an attractive single man. And I'm in an open marriage. We are consenting adults. I smiled cheerfully and kissed her hand. When we returned to my residence, clothes began to fall to the floor almost immediately as we made our way to my bedroom. I realized Robbie was a great kisser. Just like in those chick flick romances. Somewhere in the middle of it, she levitated off the bed and stood straight in the air before screaming at top volume. She began yelling something in Spanish. At that point, I knew she was bilingual after all these years living in Spain. But because I'd only been to their house a few times, my Spanish was fairly awful English. Say it in English, baby. How do I know whether you like something or not if you're speaking a language I hardly understand? I stated. I wouldn't lie and say it was the best experience of my life. Nonetheless, it was the nicest one I'd had since discovering Car's infidelity on me some years ago. I thought we went at it again that night. And in the morning, we bathed together and enjoyed washing one another's bodies before I drove her to IHOP for a delicious breakfast. We spent most of the rest of the day on the family room sofa, hugging, kissing, and watching television. For the next 3 weeks of her stay with me, she refused to sleep in the guest room again. I need to return to Spain, divorce Jorge, and then figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. Robbie stated. I know we've had a good time together, but we both realize we're not each other's long-term solution. She added. Still, Alex, you're a great guy. I sincerely apologize for starting the process of damaging your marriage. You did not force her to do what she did. And you at least expressed regret. That's more than Carrie, I stated. So I hope you meet someone who appreciates all you bring to the table. Which is quite a lot, Robbie remarked. Lisa and Felix had been living together for 5 years. And my children had both moved to the south of Spain to be closer to their mother. I missed them, not their attitudes. I was tired of apologizing for divorcing their mother because she cheated on me. Nobody was more astonished than me when Ethan called one Sunday at 6:00 a.m. Yeah, who made the call Sunday morning at 6:00? I did not check to see who was calling. I grabbed my phone and yelled, "What? This had better be an emergency, or someone will die." I yelled, "Dad, it's me." Ethan, why are you so angry? He asked at 6:00 a.m. On a Sunday. Ethan, have you forgotten about the time difference? I asked. Yes, I suppose I did, father. He responded softly, I will call back later. No, Ethan. Do not hang up. What did you need? I asked. I am not sure how to say this, Dad. But here goes. Did you know AJ is sleeping with Uncle Felix? He said more than asked. I was completely awake by the time he concluded his remark. Despite having barely gotten 3 hours of sleep. It had been a late night with a girl young enough to date my kid. But that was another story. What did you say? I yelled into the phone. You heard me, father. I said AJ is sleeping with Uncle Felix. He announced again. How do you know this? I inquired. Still at full volume, we were all over it. Uncle Felix, AJ, Mateo, and I. When it became late, all the kids retreated to their bedrooms, leaving only Uncle Felix and Mom up. In the middle of the night, I was startled up by a woman screaming, and I realized it wasn't Mom. So I got up and went to AJ's door to listen for a while because I was quite convinced I was going to have to kill Mateo. For God's sake, he's our half-brother. But then things got worse. It was not Mateo, he said. Are you certain? I cried out. Yeah, he whispered. Well, she is 27, father. I guess she can choose who she sleeps with. But it's still scary. Do you understand what I mean? And your mother is okay with this? I asked. He hesitated, unsure whether she was aware of this. 2 days later, I stood on his porch waiting for the fancy-ass doorbell to be answered. The woman of the house gasped. Alex. What are you doing here? Lisa inquired, astonished. I was in the neighborhood and wanted to see my kids. Have a problem with that? I replied gruffly. She stepped aside, allowing me in. Why? Why haven't you called? She added. You could have stayed here if we had known you were coming. I glared at her as the 3 children and Felix entered the parlor. When the kids spotted me, they came up for hugs. But Felix remained behind. They all began talking at once but went silent when I approached Felix with rage in my eyes. He lifted his hands in surrender. But it made no difference. I am not a professional fighter. But I can handle myself. When he went to his knees, I delivered my best blow on his nose, fueled by rage. I gave a hard kick. It did not crush his nuts. But his scream clarified my thesis. I took a step back and exhaled heavily, studying the shocked expressions. Uncle Alex, will you swear not to hurt Dad because of what he did with Aunt Lisa? Mateo shouted out but remained firm. I did not betray my pledge to you, I yelled back. He received that for doing it with my daughter. Are you a half-sister, sir? Were you aware he was doing it with your daughter? I inquired, shifting my focus to my ex-wife. Her expression changed from fright to disbelief as she looked at me and then back at Felix. What is he saying? She asked Felix. I am old enough to choose who I sleep with, AJ stated. I do not need permission from either of you. You are old enough to make your own errors, such as getting involved with a man who ended your parents' marriage. But you like your mother. And the gentleman on the floor should understand that there are repercussions to acts. And his most recent one gave me the opportunity to punish him for being with your mother. Something I couldn't do since I promised Mateo. I thank you for providing me the opportunity to do something long overdue. However, given all of this, your choice of partners is unsettling, I said to AJ. She blushed and apologized to her mother. Lisa glanced at AJ severely before turning to Felix and slapping him hard, forcing him to groan and pass out. That was a nice one, Mother, Ethan praised. I am sorry, Uncle Alex, I didn't know about Dad and AJ. Mateo responded, that's just wrong. You are correct. Mateo, it is not your fault. And you do not need to apologize. It was lovely to see you, although AJ, we need to have a serious conversation someday. Lisa, it's not fantastic to see you, but I have some touring to do before heading home. If you do not mind, and you have my number if Horror wishes to bring charges against me. Please let me know and I will give myself in. That will not happen, Mateo added Uncle Alex. I promise, Mateo said. My father and I also have a lot to talk about. He added, yay. Everyone shouted when they landed from their first parachute jump. And I was no exception. It was simply fantastic. My toes were the first to contact the earth. And because my legs were in front of me, I sat down gently and screamed. Then I immediately dropped to my knees. And my feet sprang back to grasp my parachute. My heartbeat was racing. I was too excited to think about checking my Fitbit. But I could feel my heart pounding so hard and fast that my chest seemed like it was about to burst. And I had a large grin on my face. Yeah. I shouted again as the jump master approached to congratulate me and ensure that I was not wounded. "Alex, nice jump," he cheered. As I got my belongings and walked out of the landing area. As I moved towards the garage where others were waiting to greet me, I noticed I was sweating profusely. And everything around me looked sharper and louder. Maybe this is what occurs in a close call. I thought to myself, well, okay. I know I was being dramatic. Maybe even overdramatic. But this was the most incredible moment of my life. Except from seeing the birth of my 2 children. Better than marrying. Even amazing than my first experience with intimacy. I may never be able to adequately describe what happened. I am 51 years old and have been divorced for a long time. I'd been feeling depressed. But a recent trip to Spain changed everything. Notably, beating Jorge Santiago elevated my emotions like nothing else. I virtually sprang out of bed on my first day back in the States. Put on my New Balance sneakers and hit the road. I'd been gradually getting back into jogging over the last year. But this morning was different. I breezed over 2 miles at a pace of 7:30 per mile. Which was far faster than my typical 8 minutes. I came to work practically full of energy. I was on cloud 9. My administrative assistant, Teresa, noticed it right away. 5 minutes after I arrived, she was at my door with her coffee and notepad, eager to catch up after my week-long vacation. But the charade did not last long. Teresa sat down, looked me in the eye and said, "Okay, spill it. You spent the week in Spain getting some action, didn't you?" "Even wonderful, Teresa," I said. "I found my mojo." "Who knew it was hiding somewhere in southern Spain?" "That is wonderful, Alex," she replied. "I'm very delighted for you. You deserved it." I decided to take a few classes at the local college just for fun. With almost 1 billion people in China, I decided to learn more about their culture. The second lesson was even more exciting. With a concentration on classic rock. Most of the pupils were my age. But there were a few younger ones who were most likely influenced by their parents' music growing up. About a month later, I had a wild idea to go skydiving. I'm not sure what inspired me, given my fear of heights. But I felt compelled to confront that fear head-on. Leaping out of a plane from 2,000 feet up seemed like the most foolish thing I could do. Maybe that's the disadvantage of living alone when you're ready to do something completely insane. No one is there to talk you out of it seriously. Who in their right mind would want to jump out of a perfectly decent airplane? But here I was, registering for the class to learn how to do it. The class was well organized. But everything changed when we got dressed, gathered in groups, and boarded the plane we were meant to jump from. To cut to the chase, I'm glad I didn't have a weak heart otherwise. I might have died, however. It turned out to be a fantastic experience. One I'm glad I only tried once after our jumps. A group of us rookies lingered around, chatting and joking as we sipped cokes and ribbed each other about our less-than-perfect landings. I was chewing on some vending machine MS when this high-pitched windstorm swept into the garage. She was definitely buzzing from the jump, albeit a few inches shorter and octaves higher than normal. It took her a bit to remove her helmet. And when she did, out came this cascade of wavy blonde hair, showing these large bright blue eyes and a smile straight out of a toothpaste advertisement. For the second time that day, I feared my heart could stop. I nearly choked on my chocolates as she took off her jumpsuit. It was a warm day, and she was dressed in a snug t-shirt and jeans that left little to the imagination. Tight with a capital T. Does not begin to describe it. She appeared to be around 30. But I later discovered she was actually 44. Her name turned out to be Eve Abraham. Perhaps because she was so small. She appeared more lively than the rest of us. I couldn't help but look at her as we sat around the table, sharing our skydiving adventures. I hoped my gaze wasn't too blatant, and that I wasn't drooling. I glanced at her left hand. Looking for a ring, there was none. After we hung out for a while, I got up and went to the parking lot without hesitation. I rose and followed her. That day at the airfield left me with a lasting memory and a date scheduled for the following Saturday night. Our first date was in a Chinese restaurant. For the first 10 minutes, Eve passionately discussed her skydiving experience. I completely understood, considering we shared that adventure. Then we discussed our personal lives. I opened up about my ex-wife and children, while she talked about her late spouse and her own 2 kids. At 34, she was widowed when a drunk driver killed her husband, leaving her to raise their children on her own. After telling her story, Eve fell silent. I could see tears welling up in her eyes, despite her best efforts to hold them back. I promised myself not to cry for myself anymore after the first year without Dan. She explained I knew I was crying out of self-pity, which was not what Dan would have preferred. He was the type of person who would remark, "That's enough tears, it is time to move onward." So that is what I did. We will never forget Dan, but we will commemorate him every day by moving forward and living our best lives. She said, her remarks having a great impact on me. I didn't say it, but I'd cried many tears over the years while grieving for my own loss. He seems like a wise guy, offering advice to a stranger. She tilted her head to the right and grinned warmly, indicating her satisfaction. As both mother and father to her children, she became quite the tomboy in her 30s. An expert at throwing baseballs and footballs, she took pride in her hockey abilities. Despite not having played sports as a child, she became an involved parent, learning about different sports and how to treat her children's ailments. I can handle cuts like a pro and ice up injuries with ease, she boasted on our second date. I took her to a Cincinnati Reds baseball game. She grabbed my program and started scoring the game, dazzling me with her abilities. My son played baseball, and my daughter played softball. I took on the position of the official statistical person for both teams. She continued, emphasizing with air quotes, standing at 5 feet 10 inches nothing. She emanated passion and vigor. She frequently wore tight tees, jeans and sneakers, perfectly blending into my surroundings and nestling comfortably under my arm. After our first date, she offered me a little kiss on the cheek. On our second date, she gently kissed me on the lips many times. As our dates progressed, the kissing intensified. But I never felt the proper time to pursue things further until our 6th date, when she made her move. "Alex, am I not what you are seeking?" she inquired while we were making out on her sofa. "You've never made a move on me." "But I want more than that," she said, smiling and tilting her head to the right. I felt myself blushing as if I were back in high school. "It has been a while for me," I replied, noting Eve's grin. "I think we could do something spectacular. But I'm frightened of messing it up," I confessed, my heart thumping. "Do not worry, honey. That will not happen on my end," she reassured me. "Now, how about you show me how quickly you can remove your clothing?" she teased, her eyes gleaming. 6 months later, we got engaged and married in a tiny ceremony attended only by her children, my son and Mateo. Despite being invited, AJ declined to go since I did not bring her new husband, Felix, whom Lisa divorced immediately after learning of his infidelity with their daughter. As expected, we did not travel to Spain for our honeymoon. I hope you enjoyed that story. Here is another one. I married a true party girl, and we met at a party. Obviously, I remember it vividly, despite my best efforts to avoid thinking about her. I wasn't expecting much when I arrived at my friend's party. The typical throng was present with familiar faces and spirited talk. But then I noticed her, a woman who radiated energy and life. She was the focus of attention. Dancing and laughing wildly, my heart was beating. And I couldn't look away from her. I gained the confidence to approach her when we started talking. And it seemed like we'd been friends for a long time. Her wit and sparkling smile made me smile back. She exuded such lively vitality it drew me in. We danced together as the night progressed, becoming engrossed in the pulse of the music. We shared stories and laughed. And I quickly realized that this woman was exceptional. She didn't hesitate to relax and enjoy herself. I was drawn to her like a moth to a flame because she embraced life with wide arms. Weeks slipped, became months, and days into weeks as each day passed. Our bond grew stronger. I realized I was falling hard and fast for her. She swept me off my feet and took me on an incredible journey. Like a whirlwind before I knew it, our loved ones were gathered around us as we stood at the altar. It was a gorgeous day just as she was. I couldn't believe how fortunate I was to have found someone so vivacious, who made every occasion seem like a reason to celebrate. She still enjoys partying after getting married. It has, if anything, been highlighted. We continue to love every new adventure that comes our way, dance in front of no one, and laugh as if there is no tomorrow. I could not be happier with how much joy and brightness she continues to bring into my life. That's how I describe our life together. Immediately after we married, it was fun, even entertaining. And I was pleased to have a girl like Sarah by my side, always shining brightly, never boring. As a social butterfly, she made all of my friends admire her. We were always asked to events and treated as if we were the center of attention. Sarah inspired me to open myself to people in ways I never thought possible. For that I'm still grateful that she emerged in my life. I couldn't help but notice a shift in our relationship as the months passed. The true party animal I had fallen head over heels for seemed to be looking for more and more opportunities to go out and enjoy herself without me. Initially I rejected it, figuring it was simply her enjoyment of socializing and having fun. However, as time passed, my distrust grew. Small outings with her friends, girl nights out, and sporadic parties that I was unable to attend due to work obligations marked the start of this whole situation. It seemed like she was gone every other night, leaving me behind. I wondered what she was doing and with whom she was spending her time. And I felt envious. I started having second thoughts. One evening I gently confronted her, sharing my concerns and reservations. She informed me that I didn't have to be concerned because she simply enjoyed socializing and having fun. She stated she loved me and wanted to spend her entire life with me. Her remarks provided a little respite from my anxiety, but the nagging emotion lingered. Her party attendance increased as the weeks turned into months. On some nights when I arrived home, the house was abandoned, and the silence filled my ears. I felt a wave of loneliness and began to mistrust our relationship. Did she still feel the same way about me as she stated she did? Was I insufficient to quench her desire for adventure and excitement? I decided to investigate her actions discreetly. Out of curiosity and fear, one evening, I followed her as she made her way to another meeting. I could see her smiling and dancing with a group of strangers through the dimly lit windows. I am completely engrossed at the moment. My heart sank because I felt excluded from her world of endless celebration. It was daunting to present her with my findings, but it was necessary. I communicated my concerns and the proof I had discovered. She stated that she had been craving the independence that parties provided. As tears streamed down her cheeks, she admitted that she had unintentionally overlooked our relationship because she had become engrossed in the allure of nightlife. I still can't believe I believed her and felt guilty about confronting her. I offered her even more freedom. But now that I think about it, she already had plenty and made the most of her situation. She became much wilder at the gatherings than she was previously. Sarah's frequent outings to parties without me had a negative impact on our relationship over time. I felt ignored and irrelevant in her life, as if I had been left behind. As I craved for a deeper connection and more time spent together, my resentment grew. I enjoyed tranquil evenings with serious conversations, but it looked like her desire to party came before our bond. I tried to communicate my concerns to her and my desire for more intimate, private interactions. She, on the other hand, regularly dismissed my annoyance, mistaking them for insecurities. I was even more annoyed by this because it appeared like she didn't understand or care about what I wanted. My irritation grew as the distance between us extended. I began to question if we were truly matched and if our relationship would endure. I began confiding in my close friends because I was lonely, and they offered me various solutions. Some told me to be patient and speak up more, while others recommended me to reconsider our relationship entirely. My dissatisfaction grew into resentment with each function she attended. I began to question whether she was seeking fulfillment with someone else and began to doubt her faithfulness. I was so fascinated with these concepts that I succumbed to the want to search through her phone for solutions. Invading her privacy made me feel awful. But what I discovered confirmed my suspicions. She had been flirting and meeting other individuals without my knowledge. Her album was filled with photos of her in settings that even her husband, would never want to see. The text messages she exchanged with many guys, loaded with excessive sexual talk and nudes of both my wife and the other guys, made me want to throw up. I had no idea Sarah had this other side to her. And along with being a bouncy social butterfly, she was also texting all of the boys about how much she wanted them. It was pathetic, but I could not say anything. I was enraged, but I couldn't confront her just yet, as I found she could have been pregnant, and it was definitely not my child. We stopped making love as she became preoccupied with partying and having fun. There was no way it could be mine. Sarah began to refrain from partying and drinking. One day she was having the best time ever, her veins likely filled with nothing but alcohol. And the other day she simply stopped. She decided to stay at home, which was highly unusual for her. I assumed she was hungover, but she also mentioned that she didn't want to go to the party for the next few days. That was why I became a little suspicious. As time passed, I started to observe tiny changes in her behavior and look. Something appeared off with her. She began to be more cautious, strangely cautious. And she looked melancholy because she was only sitting at our place, not attending any events with or without me. I suddenly noticed her throwing up several times at night. It seemed surprising because she was generally in such good health, even a large dosage of booze couldn't make her vomit. She also appeared more exhausted than the ball of enthusiasm she used to always be. But the way she grabbed her belly while she was doing something, as if she wanted to protect it, made me virtually confident that she was pregnant and attempting to hide it. She has never done such a specific action before, so I would have noticed. I tried to thoroughly question her about it, however. Whenever I tried to bring up the matter, she either changed the conversation or made a critical remark. She refused to speak, which just strengthened my suspicions. Why was she dodging the topic? It merely confirmed that I was probably right to be wary and cautious. Her refusal to speak only made me more irritated and angry. I couldn't disguise my knowledge of her various affairs any longer. I decided to speak with her more directly in an attempt to learn the truth. I conveyed my concerns and mentioned the physical changes I had experienced, as well as the pregnancy-related symptoms. She got very defensive, denying that she could be pregnant. She claimed that I was overanalyzing and placing too much emphasis on common physical changes. At this moment, I believe she sensed that I knew she was pregnant and that this was not my child. I lost all patience when she continued to refuse to comply and tell me the truth. Now, I have to state that I am not proud of what I did back then. But you can imagine how I felt, knowing that my wife has many relationships on the side and is pregnant by one of them. At this point I was done. I rose up from my chair at the kitchen table while we were eating supper and discussing Sarah's impending pregnancy. She looked at me, unsure why I was moving so quickly and why I had suddenly grown so angry. If you don't want to tell me the truth. I talked slowly and on purpose. So I suppose there's only one way to find out. I said, my voice filled with a cold determination. I never participated in violent activities, in truth. I used to be a serene and tranquil guy. But then was the moment when I fully lost control. I approached her as she ran, but I moved so quickly. I grabbed her by the hair and pushed her off her chair. She collapsed on the floor, crying in anguish as I refused to let go of her beautiful brown hair. I tossed her around for another second, forcing her to crawl on the floor. I had some fun with her, letting go of my anger and fury before getting to the point. It's difficult for me to talk about what I've done to the woman I once loved. But I was quite angry at the time. My strategy worked though. Through the screams of anguish she was able to say, "Stop, I'm pregnant, don't get me wrong. I'm not a psychopath." But her comment made me smile enormously. I was correct, she was pregnant. And it clearly wasn't my baby. Good, I murmured. Letting her go, I nearly got rid of that. An indisputable proof of your infidelity. She was genuinely astonished that I knew about her various affairs. What did she actually think would happen if I knew it was my child? If I knew she was faithful to me? I told her everything I learned about her. I told her about all the messages, photographs, and videos I'd seen on her phone. I also admitted that I had all of the evidence of her betrayal on my laptop. I didn't care at this time. She may believe I'm a nasty person, but she was worse for me. My invasion of her privacy was insignificant in comparison to what she did to me. She begged for mercy as I grasped her hair once again. I hauled her out the door and put her into her vehicle. I left her there for a minute, since she was still screaming and sobbing. I returned to the house to turn on my laptop, as I had everything to prove her infidelity. "We'll see what your parents say about this," I added as I sat behind the wheel. Sarah was crying in the back seat. "Please. Why are you doing this, Jack?" she pleaded. "I'll just pretend that the fact that you were pregnant by another man makes no difference," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Besides, why are you scared? Don't you believe your parents should be aware of the kind of daughter they have?" As we came to a halt in front of her parents' house, I advised her to calm down. I didn't want her to seem like she had been abused by me. This entire thing was intended to make her appear bad. Not me in reality. I was more of a victim than she was. She brushed her tears away, caught her breath, and also corrected her hair slightly after what I had done to her. We both got out of the car. I seized my laptop and tightened my grip on it. I grabbed Sarah's hand, helped her out of the car, and escorted her to her parents' house. I rang the doorbell and waited. Fortunately, her father had opened the door. He and I were always on good terms, despite the fact that he was a staunch conservative. "More so than you might think," I said, not even greeting him. "I didn't come here to be polite. Your daughter did this to me." I didn't even say hello, which irritated me to no end. "What his daughter did to me," I said. All I wanted was for him and his wife to know the truth about their daughter. Sarah, evidently, she couldn't help herself and began crying again. I didn't care anymore. I strolled into the house and went right to the living room. I sat down on the sofa next to the table and opened my laptop. I requested Sarah's parents to sit beside me. Sarah attempted to persuade me till the end, crying and wailing, making her mother feel sorry for her because she was unaware of her daughter's abilities at the time. I showed her parents all of the intimate and explicit photos and videos I had extracted from her phone, in case she deleted it or threw it away. I also read all the communications she was sending to other men behind my back aloud. Her face turned scarlet with humiliation. And I also observed her parents' emotions, namely her mother's facial expression, which ranged from shock to disdain. Her father became enraged, almost as angry as I had been the entire time, adding gasoline to the flames. I also revealed that Sarah was pregnant. Her mother nearly fainted, and her father nearly had a heart attack. I was bold enough to question her out loud. Who the father is? I was as curious as her parents were. But I also suspected she might not know the answer to that question. And I was correct. She wasn't sure who the father was in fact. She couldn't name all of her lovers, as it turns out. aside from her regular encounters with select men. She also enjoyed one-night stands. This got me extra angrier, but only for a minute. Then I couldn't stop thinking about my great retaliation. Her own look on the faces of her parents reminded me that I did what I needed to do to feel relieved after she cheated on me in such a way. In addition, I supplied the folder with evidence of her betrayal to her father. After that, I simply left. Sarah never returned to me, even to pick up her belongings. Her sister did it for her. She gave me the cold shoulder. But I could tell she was humiliated in front of me due to what her sister had done. A few weeks later, I learned that Sarah's parents had disowned her. In truth, I was a little startled. I knew they were conservative, but I didn't expect them to go this far. See how conservative and intolerant they were. They couldn't even handle the reality that their daughter was an adult who made her own choices, even if they were poor ones. A few days ago, I learned that Sarah had given birth to the child she had almost lost because of me. But I've heard that her newborn is healthy. That is good, because if it wasn't, Sarah would probably blame me and accuse me of domestic violence.